Well, ladies and gentlemen, the prodigal child returns from the United States, having gone and made the case that South Africa is, well, a shithole to the rest of the world.
Thanks, Byron. It was great. It was like a 2.5, 3 week trip. It was amazing. It was truly amazing. It's inspirational because America is such an incredible country. And relative to South Africa, it's just eons ahead. It's inspiring to be there, to meet the people, to see what's going on. What a country.
So tell me about where you went. I know you went on a lot of people's podcasts. Can you remember them all?
Yeah. So I flew to Miami, and it happened to be the week that Spineless Cyril met Donald Trump. Spineless Cyril and his entourage met Donald Trump. And I had a Tuesday Patrick Bet-David interview. Wednesday, Cyril met Donald. And Thursday, I was Dave Rubin, the Rubin Report. So it was quite a timely event. And then I flew to DC, and I was on a couple of the sort of Beltway, MAGA TV network kind of programs. John Solomon, John Fredericks. I was interviewed by Matt Foldy for the Washington News. And then I flew to New York, where I did Newsmax with Bob Schmidt, and then Remote with Charlie Kirk and Lara Logan. And then I did Larry O'Connor when I got back to South Africa. So those are the American podcasters. And then I took a few days off to meet a buddy in the Bahamas. And then I flew to London to do trigonometry and to have a few business meetings, and then came home. So it was quite extensive. And then Rubin and Patrick Bet-David and Charlie Kirk, big numbers on those. Big numbers.
Yeah, I mean, that's quite a marathon of podcasts. Didn't you get worn out?
Yeah, it is quite tiring because, there's a lot of, chit chat beforehand. Then you've got the podcasts themselves, an hour and a half. It's like a marathon. And things were changing. I mean, there's a lot of things going on prior to the Cyril meeting, post the Cyril meeting, just getting up to speed, calling people, finding out their views, and synthesizing my view on the whole thing. I guess the main message is that most Americans have no idea what's going on in South Africa. And I think it was very valuable for them to hear my perspective, and also as a follow-up to the Cyril-Trump meetings, because that hit the press, the refugees, the Cyril-Trump meeting, having the golfers there, the nuances of the whole thing. And then, me tackling the issues with each of them as it evolved. So it was very timely. But Americans generally have no idea what's going on in South Africa. They kind of remember apartheid ending, Mandela coming in, and then they've lost interest. This brought everything back right into the front line.
Yeah. I imagine that the reason that everybody there has almost lost interest, specifically in the US, is because South Africa just isn't that important to them.
It really isn't. It's kind of an irrelevance. And only if they have South African friends or have been there on holiday do they have any kind of recognition of the country and what's going on. This was a wake-up call to a lot of them. The country in free fall, a country deindustrializing, a country where there's, rampant racism and socialism being implemented by a government, Soviet-trained. They had no idea about this. And then obviously they kill the Boer, Julius and his lunatics, was pretty shocked to the system of what's going on. The noose tightening economically around South Africans, and the word genocide, all the discussion around that.
And what that specifically means to them. What do you think let's actually tackle this systematically. So let's start off first. As you say, you got the Cyril-Trump meeting, if you want to call it that. I don't know how I'd want to describe it. I don't really think it was a meeting as such. Let's call it a farce. The Cyril-Trump farce occurred. What was your view of what happened?
Firstly, I was kind of shocked to see, two white golfers, a white billionaire, and then, as Cyril described it, his white agricultural minister. When Cyril's in trouble, when he's got a difficult situation, who does he ask to ride to the rescue? Whiteys. It's one way to look at it. It was pretty pathetic. And why were they there? I mean, some people say Donald Trump invited the golfers. I don't know. Why was Johan Rupert there, and who was he defending? Was he defending Cyril? Looked like it. It looked like he's right like this with the ANC. And what's that all about? And did it blunt the Trump initiative to punish the racists and socialists in this country and the hate speech and anti-Americans in this country? I don't know. Maybe it did a little bit, because we haven't heard anything. Everything's gone quiet. The world's moved on to the next topic, which is the moronic Greta Thunberg and her little gimmickers on that boat sailing to Gaza. I mean, pity the boat didn't sink on its own on the way there.
RDF have described her as being the selfie activist.
She's an idiot. I mean, she's a complete idiot. If that's the best the left could do, well, I'm not surprised. So there's the Congressman Ronnie Jackson bill that's going to Congress and going to the Senate. They're looking for input on that at the moment. And that is targeting, it says government ministers and officials in the ANC, but it needs to be broadened to, EFF, MK, and anyone who's spouting anti-Americanism, hate speech, racism, and socialism. So that bill at some point will go to Congress and go to Senate. And then if it makes it through, it'll be put into law to punish the bad guys in South Africa. I think that's still got momentum. But,
So that apparently names Cyril, and it names Pandor, but it doesn't name
Julius.
Although it does name Jacob Zuma, but it only names him like twice. So he's not a big feature in it. But the biggest feature in the whole thing is Pandor, and then followed by Cyril.
Yeah, it's the Iran link, and it's corruption. But it's ANC and ANC officials and government ministers. It needs to be broadened. It really does. So they're looking for input, and I'd encourage your viewers to contact. I'll give you her name. I'll encourage your viewers to contact the person in Ronnie Jackson's office to broaden the bill. Shall I give the name of the lady?
Go for it.
Here we go. Katie Wallach, Wallach, and her email is Katie, Katie .Wallach @mail.house.gov. Can you see that? No, I can't see that. You can see that.
Bit blurry. There you go. Okay, so she's a senior legislator assistant.
Yeah. So she asked, could everyone please give input on the bill, and then that would be very useful. So I didn't meet Ronnie Jackson, but
I made a comment on one of my videos that the reason you said why were they there, and I made the comment on one of my videos that it was Cyril's attempt to say, I'm not racist. See, I have white friends.
Well, they are clearly friends of Cyril's, and I'm not a friend of Cyril's, and I don't think any of your viewers are either. Cyril, head of the ANC since 2017, but deputy president under Zuma, part of the cadre commission. He is directly responsible for the damage done to this country by the ANC, the deindustrialization, the 60% youth unemployment. Cyril is responsible. And why these guys defending him, I have no idea. No idea.
So there's an allegation that some of it's financial rights. So the reason that they defending him is because of financial interest. But John
not the golfers.
No, but then I actually thought Retief was
He was good.
honest about it. He was very diplomatic, and he was probably the best speaker in my opinion. Purely because when he was asked, like from a political point, they were like, what's it like there? He's like, well, I've had family that have been killed and shot at. And yeah, they do try to burn the place down. But, I love country and I love farming. Like it was the perfect balance of like truth, but also not getting like deeply personal. So I thought Retief did a fantastic job. I must admit, when he called up the lady from Cosatu, I cringed like there was no tomorrow. Purely because he's gone into a room that are incredibly hostile to commies, and he's like, I've got a good idea, let's get a commie to stand up there and talk about how great South Africa was. But actually he wasn't that bad. I expected her to go full on Cosatu bull rubbish, but she didn't. She was kind of controlled. But the question really becomes what happens now afterwards. I know they went into, a closed meeting. Nobody really knows what the outcome of that meeting was or what got discussed. Do you have a sense of what you think maybe they discussed?
Leave us alone. We're a sovereign nation. We'll sort it out ourselves. The farm murders are not as bad as everyone says. Not true. It's I sleep with my door open, that classic comment that I think Johan Rupert's going to regret to his dying day, because he lives in London and has hundreds of millions of rand of security. So clearly he can sleep with his door open. And I think the aim of that delegation was to deflect the potential anger of Donald Trump and his administration against South Africa and protect South Africa. But in protecting South Africa in that way, we lose an international dynamic that could put huge pressure on the ANC, EFF and MK that we need. And, maybe they're just useful idiots. Maybe that's exactly what they are.
So there's a big discussion that was occurring whilst you were away, and that's who's actually going to take over now from Cyril. And it looks like it's Patrice. So it looks like Patrice has been pushed as the next president now of the ANC. That's starting to gain traction. I saw the Propaganda 24 ran quite a few headlines around why he would make the best president, and obviously he's been pushed by a lot of the media outlets now as the only viable alternative now for the ANC. What's your views on Patrice as potential successor to Cyril?
You shouldn't be reading News 24. They're ANC bootlickers, and you should not have a subscription there, nor should any of your viewers. So that's point number one.
I have to read this stuff so that everybody else doesn't have to.
Is that your excuse? Okay. I mean, News 24 are ANC bootlickers, 100%. The whole of Naspers, basically, to keep their licenses, keep DSTV, are just doing what the ANC tell them to do. They're complicit. Putting that aside, what was the question? Sorry, I got so pissed off when you said
Patrice as the potential. Like I say, when you start reading what's going on in the media, you get a very good view as to somebody's been told to write this. Adrian Basson actually wrote the article about why he would be the best alternative. And it's like the article was so praiseworthy of Patrice that it was obvious that he had basically been told to write the article.
Of course,
it was obvious.
That's what he does. That's what he and Peter
So then it's like, okay, cool. So they've been suggested they should write this article. Clearly, that's what Cyril wants as the potential successor, and it would make sense because Patrice is, I think, Cyril's brother-in-law. But what's your view? What's your view of Patrice?
So let me give you the positives. Let me give the positives first.
Mm-hmm.
He's a businessman, and he's a good businessman. Okay, even though he's a BEE businessman, and he was handed a lot of it on a plate, including Anglovol Mining, which became African Rainbow Minerals. That was our family mining business. He is a good businessman. He is a generous man. So he gives a lot of money to charity. And he was the first African to sign the Giving Pledge, which is the Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, a third of your, when you die, a third of your will goes to charity. So he was the first African to sign it. So let's give him kudos and credit. But he doesn't really live in South Africa. He's always flitting between the Cannes Film Festival and the Grammy Awards and all these things because he and Precious are into that sort of thing. And, they invest in sport and media. That's their world, and go to all these charity events overseas. And, he's got his team running his business here in South Africa, the two Johans, who are very, very good, by the way. So he's very arm's length from South Africa. He's very up, to 10,000 foot private jet kind of lifestyle. Can he make the tough decisions? Can he put a proper team together? How linked is he to the ANC? I mean, he gives a lot of money to the ANC through Harmony Gold Mine. And, I think he gives money to the DA too, covers both angles. But he's a big donor to the ANC. He's a brother-in-law of Cyril. And, I have questions about his attention span. I have the same affliction, so I'm allowed to say that. He would be better than Paul Mashatile and Fikile Mbalula. Maybe that's the most I can say about it. But, is he that interested? Why would he take it on? Would he continue this nonsense of transformation, which is actually just racism and socialism hidden under a brand called transformation, RET? I don't know. He'd be better than the others.
Mm. It's a tough one because outside of him, I'm not sure actually how the ANC is looking in terms of who's going to be the next successor. But according to the latest statistics at time of recording, ANC's political fortunes are still on the decline. The polling numbers, okay, look, I appreciate polling's polling and it's subjective and whatever else, but I mean it's the best we got at this point in time.
You remember Gayton said polls are for strippers.
Yeah, but then one also has to remind ourselves that if the polls were to be believed, we'd all have President Julius. So
true.
But at the end of the day, they're suggesting, and it does appear that the mood on the ground is still nobody talks positively the ANC, and the ANC's fortunes continue to decline. So it does look like we're going to get to the next election and find that pretty much every party is at around 20%. Which brings an amazingly difficult dynamic for everybody else going forward in terms of coalition politics, which really kind of brings on to the next logical topic, which is how do you actually see our time now between now and 2029? How do you see that going? Do you think that ANC gets to buckle down more? Is it going to get challenged? Are we going to see South Africa get worse or better? What's your view?
Economically, just getting worse by the day. Davy Root, who's an economist that I really admire, was talking, low 1.2, 1.3% economic growth. He's now talking lower than 1% economic growth. Population growth still 2%. So, the budget had, I think, 1.8% economic growth, came down to 1.5%. I think we're under 1%. We're going nowhere. So I think the country's uninvestable. We're still overregulated. We're still at BEE being hardened and pushed even harder. NHI is not dead. EWC is in law. I mean, why would anyone invest in this country? Why would anyone invest in this country? Zero chance. So economically, between now and the municipals, which is end of 2026, early 2027, the ANC is going to get shredded in the municipals. Shredded. Shredded. They're going to go absolutely get hammered because that's about service delivery. And there is no one worse. I mean, we haven't seen MK and EFF yet, but there's no one worse than the ANC at service delivery. They only know how to break and steal.
Yeah. So I think, interestingly, I think you must have missed that because they said that the growth rate from the first quarter this year that was announced, I think last week, and it was 0%. So our growth rate is currently at 0. No, it's a true story. It was 0%. So they've downgraded the forecast now. I think the budget was, as you say, I think it was roughly about 1.3, 1.6, something like that.
So
it was 1.8.
The GNU will unwind before the municipals. I think we've got probably a year more to go at most with the GNU, and then it's going to unwind. I think FF Plus are going to pull out, which would be a sensible move, and then the DA is going to say, right, we're campaigning as opposition party on service delivery, and we're going to do well in the municipals. The DA will do well. But then 2029. So Prince Mashele is a guy that I really respect, and I think you should talk to him if you haven't already. Get him on your show. He's a super smart guy, and he says the ANC is going to be...
He's the guy who's the columnist for Times Live, right?
I don't read Times Live. So he's he's a very, very smart political analyst, and I think if you combine his views with Frans Cronje, and R.W. Johnson, you've probably got exactly where we are and where we're heading. But he says the ANC is going to be irrelevant in 2029. Blank sheet of paper.
But then what takes over? Because obviously current suggestions, and please everybody understand, this is speculation. I don't know this firsthand. So I'm going to use the old journalistic allegedly. So allegedly, Jacob Zuma is already starting to give signs of dementia. Allegedly. So we don't know how much time he has left. It's a safe bet that Zuma won't be on the ballots in 2029.
Well, Jacob Zuma, maybe not. Might be one of the Duduzile, Duduzani.
Yeah, I mean, but they're not going to get any real votes. The problem is that nobody really likes the kids. The kids are both difficult to get on with.
I don't know. I have no idea. And then Julius is going nowhere. He's lost all his team and he's spinning wheels. So Prince Mashele's view is absolute blank sheet of paper. I mean, he even says the DA is going to be irrelevant by 2029, but I doubt that. That I doubt. And I think the good news, what I hope is going to happen with democracy kind of grinding its way slowly in the right direction, is that in 2029, you'll have a coalition in the center, kind of a center-left, more Democrat than Republican type entity, made up of what's left of the ANC, the capitalist, BEE, kind of Patrice Motsepe-ish kind of people. And that's of the 40% where it is today, assuming the last election as opposed to the polls, I'd say 15% of that are the kind of Judeo-Christian, pro-West, free market, capitalist ANC voters. So if you take 15%, you're saying everyone at 20, but let's say the ANC is 15 to 18, the DA is at 22, 25, Patriotic Alliance at 10, FF Plus at 3, 4, 5, IFP at 3, 4, 5. You have a coalition of those guys, which is much like the GNU, but the ANC may not even be the lead partner in that. It might be the DA. And that is the good news for 2029 of where I think we're heading. And I think we might get there. But between now and then, it's all bad news.
Okay, so then let's play this as a logical thing. So I watched you in a podcast with Chris Wyatt, and during that podcast, you made a suggestion. Maybe it was just how you were feeling at the time. Obviously, you were traveling a lot and you were very tired, But you made a suggestion during there that if you were a white South African, you should consider leaving. Do you still hold that view?
Yeah, absolutely.
Expand that. What's your view on that?
I look at America. I look at South Africa. What is, other than loving this country and Bryflace and Chevrolet and Sunny Skies and Chevrolet, whatever that ad was, there's actually no economic reason to be in this country. In fact, it's negative. South African economy is the same size as Louisiana. So if you're a big shot in South African business, you're a big shot in Louisiana. But in America, Americans work harder than anyone else. On the productivity index, they're right at the top. The country is booming. I mean, yesterday alone, this Gerrit Steenkamp, who my buddy from Lioncate, is an absolute whiz on AI, okay? And I said, Gerrit, I really have to become an expert on AI. I'm missing a trick here, I'm sending you stuff. I'm lazy, and you just sort it out for me. I need a week's tutorial on AI. And he said, you don't need it. I said, why not? He said, download GenStack or Manus, M-A-N-U-S. They're the AIs of all the other AIs. So they AI, all the other stuff everyone else is doing. You want to do video, you can do video through Manus. If you want to launch a new business, if you've got a business idea, you can do the business plan, the website, the coding, the business plan, the market entry plan in 5 minutes. I tried it last night. It blew my mind. And everyone in America, you could launch a business a day, okay? Just go to GenStack or Manus. It's mind-boggling. I'm going to be spending the whole next part of my life launching a business a day through these AI. It is extraordinary. And in South Africa, we're just clueless. People have no idea. With the worst education in the world, massive amounts spent, worst results. We have racist laws, socialist laws, anti-Semitic, anti-American, anti-West. I mean, why be here other than on holiday or other than living in a bubble in the Cape, operating businesses internationally? That's probably the right way around. But for young people, they'd be completely and utterly mad to stay here for patriotic reasons. I'm a 3 out of 10 on South Africa for the next 4 years. I mean, I think it's uninvestable, unplayable. Look, if you've got money in South Africa and you're not leaving, you've got to put your money to work. You've got to try and do the best you can. Okay? As business people, we build businesses. You're not going to sort of hide in a cupboard. But for young people who've got some dynamism, want to improve their lives, you'd be mad to stay here.
Interesting. So, I mean, obviously for you personally, pretty sure I asked you this before,
I'm 64, turning 65 this year. I mean, yes, I said to Katie, yes, let's set up a base in America. Let's start focusing the next 2 generations in America. We need to sort of start building a base there, which we'll do, but not yet. We like it in the Cape. Our kids are being well educated. It's private schools. We're state-proofing ourselves. We've got solar, we've got borehole, we've got private security. Like most South Africans, what do we actually need a government for? We pay taxes. What do we get? Nothing. Thanks, ANC. Nothing. So I'm pretty negative about South Africa. I just don't see anything heading in the right direction on an economic point of view.
I think that's going to disappoint a lot of my viewer base, and I think a lot of people are probably going to struggle with that sentiment.
I know, but
logical reasons.
But you know what? If I was a politician, if I was a big corporate South African, I'd be lying to you. I'd be telling the party line. You got to believe in the country. You've got to be patriotic. The flag. Get up and make things happen. Give to charity. Help people. Blah 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 blah. Fair enough. But actually, you've got to invest in yourself. You've got to believe in your family, and you've got to do the right thing for your kids and the next generation. And the right thing is not in South Africa. I'm telling you, right? I'm being honest with you. I'm the only guy that tells it like it is. If you listen to someone like Paul Harris, firstly, he's the biggest dullard in South Africa. But secondly, he's wrapping the party line about patriotism because he lives in a gated community with a lot of money in the bank. Very few other people do. So I'm telling it like it is for the average South African. I'm not hopeful.
Jeez. It's a hard one, eh? It's a difficult one.
I'm telling the truth. I think, I've always said if kids get their matric or a decent degree, go overseas, build your network, build your money, build your contacts, gain experience. And if we, the older generation, fix this country, you will come back any time. And the reverse diaspora will lift all boats. Imagine that 100,000 of these extraordinary young people who spent 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years overseas come back with money and skills. This country will take off like a rocket. But it's not going to.
It would do, but I don't see the need for many to do it. It's unfortunate because many in the diaspora, the South African diaspora, would want to come home for numerous reasons. They love their land, but they don't love the politics here. The politics here are just
if they see things changing, if they really see things changing, there's a chance to come back and make a huge difference. But otherwise, why bother?
Do you ever see that being the case, though? That things will turn around enough to warrant people wanting to come back?
Well, I gave you my positive good news scenario for 2029. That's, if that happens, you'll see people flooding back. And this country is fixable, but not under the ANC.
I'm in agreement, but the problem is how we get the ANC out at this point in time. And it's difficult because you don't really know what the alternative will be. Many people would say, well, get the DA and the DA could do some good. But I got to say, I'm not enamored by their performance in the GNU so far. Huh?
Well, I went to a DA lunch on a wine farm, like 300 people. I was put in a far corner table because clearly,
rogue.
They put up with me. I'm a bit rogue. And one by one, all the ministers and deputy ministers of the DA and the government presented, max 15 minutes. Some were given 10 minutes of what they've done in the, 8-9 months since they were in. It was so impressive. It blew me away. Solly Malatsi, Leon Schreiber, Samantha Graham, the Deputy Minister of Electricity. The things they put in place, the DA, in each of these positions has been hugely impressive. It's exactly what you want to hear. And I said to the Chief of Staff for John Steenhuisen, why didn't you video this? Just video this and put it out there because no one has heard any of this stuff. The DA websites, no one goes to it. And the podcasts has got tiny following. I hope they realize they've not got a very good media following and they don't get the message out, but they've done an unbelievably good job. But its problem is the ministries that they're involved in is lipstick on a pig. All the amazing work Leon Schreiber's doing for Home Affairs, 40,000 visas in a pile on that idiot Aaron Mozzoledi's desk for 2-3 years. Bang! In 6 months, Leon had cleared them all. that sort of stuff doesn't change the economic growth trajectory of this country. It fixes things, makes things work better, but it certainly doesn't sort out economic growth. And the GNU only seems to be focused on putting lipstick on the pig, getting the DA to fix bits and pieces around the, plaster on a major wound, and keep Jacob Zuma and Julius Malema out. Have you ever heard them talk about genuinely fixing the issue of economic growth? Because anything related to economic growth is ANC policy, and it's a socialist policy. It's transformation.
It's a very interesting scenario at the moment, because obviously one of the things that we all know as being one of the major catalysts for economic degradation in the country is BEE. Mainly not because Black economic empowerment, empowering Black individuals, has been, the upshot of the end of the country. It's actually due to the fact that, as you know, it has nothing to do with Black people. It has everything to do with the connected cadres, and it has everything to do with them self-enriching. You can't say, I come back to a couple of scenarios of this that occurred while you were gone. I don't know if you saw the story of Daybreak. So that's, and I know this will sound bad, but it's a reality. And that is, how do you lose money on chicken in Africa? Dude, I don't understand how you lose money on chicken in Africa. It's like everybody freaking eats chicken, dude, and they eat it by the buckets. Like the buckets. It's a stereotype.
I can tell you one way to lose money. Let the Brazilians dump their cheap chicken on the market, and they inject them with water so that they increase the weight, increase the price, and the Brazilians are dumping all over the place. So it's not an easy market to compete with the Brazilians, because they cheat.
Yeah.
But I hear what you're saying.
There's a story of Daybreak. So Daybreak is a government bomb, if you want to call it that. And it's the actual board, the lady who was on the board, took over R500,000 in a bonus, and then the next day resigned and just didn't come to work. And then the whole board just resigned and didn't come to work after they got bonuses. And it's like the entire place is in degradation. It's fallen apart. And I think they had something like 2 million chickens or something just die overnight. And it's like, how do you get to that state? And their answer is now, okay, just give us the money. Like, dude, the money is what caused the problem in the first place. You gave people salaries. They didn't want to do the job. They screwed up on the board. But this is a story of so much BE stuff, and that's the problem with BE. There's another story about the trains. I don't know if you heard this one. So PRASA spent $2 billion on trains to redo trains. $2 billion. That's a serious amount of money. Anyway, so they go and they spend $2 billion on trains. They refurbish them. And all the trains were just dumped back in the storage yard with the windows open. So the trains are ruined.
So there's a friend of mine, Horsey Matthews. Okay. Unbelievable guy. His only negative is his sister is Naledi Pandor. Okay. But that's not his fault. Okay. And he says, Rob, we'll always be friends. I know you don't like Naledi Pandor and what she stands for. Let's just separate our friendship with that. She's my sister, and that's that. So I never say to him, your sister's an anti-Semite or a gangster or whatever. I avoid saying that. He's a great guy. And he was appointed as head of PRASA to fix PRASA. He was blown away by the corruption he found. And when he tried to fix it, he got fired. And he's still suing them. And the High Court said he needs to be reinstalled. They wouldn't even let him through the door. So this is, he was ANC. His family are aristocrats of the ANC. He's now allergic to the ANC, despite his sister being, ex-gangster minister. And he just said even the security guards were there to steal. He couldn't trust his own security. So here's the problem, Barry. I am now suffering from South Africa PTSD. Okay. And I am. Most South Africans,
It's SA fatigue.
It's SA fatigue. People read this every day and they just go, more of the same. And then they are just so worn down and so exhausted by the endless corruption of the ANC, their criminality, the no accountability, the Zondo Commission where no one gets indicted. The NPAs, everything is broken. The judiciary is compromised. Is state capture, judiciary done. That is why I'm 3 out of 10. That is why I'm so damn negative. And that is why I'm probably going to stand back from political activism, because I'm hurtful, I'm PTSD, I'm burned out, and don't believe in South Africa right now.
Mm.
He said,
But you're not going anywhere, and your kids are still in Cape Town.
But a friend of mine said to me 3 years ago, "What are you doing, Rob? There's no upside to your political activism or capitalist activism. There's only downside. Corporates won't take my call. I don't get invited to golf tournaments anymore. Not that I really care about those. I've got over those. And, people are bitching and moaning and threats and blah, 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 blah. And the only affirmation is from the average South African who goes, Rob, thank you for what you're doing, for giving us a voice. And that means a lot to me. But I've hit a wall where unless something happens, what am I doing this for? It's not fun. And so I said to my wife, Katie, I'm standing back from this now. I'm going to take a big break. Now, I know you've heard it before, and I know it didn't last very long, but I've committed to her that enough's enough. Other people need to stand up. The country needs to stand up. People need to say no, and the corporates need to grow a spine. And through the DA and through the other good parties of the GNU, tell the ANC to piss off with their policies. We've had enough. Okay, they need to stand up now for once. And for me, I'm going to talk about other stuff. I'm going to talk about small modular nuclear reactors. I'm going to talk about the incredible developments of AI. I'm going to talk about America being the greatest country in the world. I'm going to talk about positives around the world. There are very few here.
So interesting. So you're going to step away from doing podcasts and news analysts.
Yeah.
So then
on South African
what's
politics.
next?
I'm going to talk about other stuff. I'm going to talk about business and technology developments and stuff that really interests me. I want to try stand-up comedy. I saw Konstantin Kissen. I was on his trigonometry show. I've always wanted to be on trigonometry because I hugely admire Konstantin. And I mentioned to him, I said, I think my evolution of where I'm going is to get into stand-up comedy. And he went, good luck with that. And he said it in a way that was like, I don't think you should do that. But, more people need to stand up. More people need to make an effort. But I just feel like our politics are going nowhere.
Interesting. So what's next for then Rob Hersov? I know you're working on this on Truth Report. Do you want to tell my audience about Truth Report?
Yeah.
What that
so
is?
Truth Report, where you're involved too, and a few other extraordinary people, is to try and amalgamate and amplify two A's. How can I add another A in? Amalgamate, amplify. The aura of I did it, of extraordinary people like you and Gareth Cliff and Concerned Citizen and Sama and Pomlazi and others. Pull them together, amplify their voice, and create the Truth Report, which speaks to South Africans in a way that the bootlicking News 24 and the anti-capitalist Daily Maverick do not. So it's a new media venture, and it's a sort of daily wire for South Africa, and it's launching very soon. In fact, there have been podcasts coming out under the Truth Report, and it'd be great if people found it, subscribed. I think it's at 80,000 subscribers. Get it through 200 as quickly as possible, and make it something that people refer to for the facts. The 5 Fs, let's see if we can remember what they are. Facts, freedom, flag, family,
Faith.
and faith. 5 Fs. And that's what the Truth Report's about. So I'm one of the people backing it, and there's a great team behind it, and it's going live very soon. So you want to see me there, but I'll be the good news guy.
So is that what Rob Hersov's going to spend his time doing going forward?
No, I'm going to very focused on my family. I'm getting fit again. There's another F. Get back in the gym, lifting weights, try to build a bit of bulk, age 64. And family, focus on my family, spend way more time, and on my businesses. So I've got various businesses that need my attention. I'm going to get back to that. But also some of my personal interests, golf, stand-up comedy, and who knows what's coming next. Cartooning. You'll still see me
So
around. I'm just burned out of this political analyst stuff.
just going to say, so would you say this, your whole stint in the US talking about South Africa is almost for 2 weeks just burned you out of
I was burned out
politics?
before. And I wanted to do these international. I really wanted, and I've invited them all to South Africa. I think Tucker's coming in January. Dave Rubin's definitely keen. Patrick Beck-David is definitely keen. And I think that'll be good. And, that you get you on their show, get Gareth Cliff on their show, get Matt G and others, who knows? Mix it up a bit. I think people are tired of my wife said to me, she said, Rob, you're becoming hugely repetitive, which is probably true if you watch and listen to everything I've ever done. It's repetitive. Of course it is. How am I going to come up with new ideas every day unless I steal them from Franz Grenier and R.W. Johnson and Morning Shot?
Yeah, I mean it's a tough one, right? Because when you're involved in the news, sometimes, especially if you're giving a message, then your message delivery becomes more refined, but the message is fairly consistent.
Look, my message is I'm sick to death of the ANC. They've destroyed this country. They're responsible for the destruction, deindustrialization. They've way past their sell-by date. And South Africa needs to wake up and get rid of these guys. They're thieving, cheating, stealing, bad people. That's my consistent message. And people say, oh, Rob, what's your plan to fix the country? It's very, very easy. I've given my 10 steps to fix the country. But until we have leadership in South Africa that says, this isn't working, we need to go in a new direction, what's the point? Economic growth lifts all boats. And this government doesn't care about economic growth. They care about more people being homeless, uneducated, unemployed, so they can bribe them with a social grant. It's pure malevolence. Soviet playbook in action. Anyway, I've repeated myself again and again.
It's a difficult one for me as well, because obviously I do look at politics from two areas. I look at politics from the United Kingdom, and I look at it obviously in South Africa. And, I'm sure you know this, but the number one destination that most South Africans generally tend to look at is actually the United Kingdom. I think more people immigrate to the United Kingdom than the other countries. But the United Kingdom is like that's done, dude. That's finished. I mean, I've made quite a few videos around population replacement there. A lot of the population that the United Kingdom's now importing is like proper jihadi nut jobs that would be considered criminals in their native countries, but they're all given asylum in the UK. Infrastructure in the UK is going down.
Look,
taxes are off the charts.
It's still run better. It's still cleaner. The roads are superb. It's got 20 better reasons to live there than here. But we have freer speech. How about that for something weird? What we've just said on this podcast, we'd have been arrested in the UK for some weird law. Whereas here, there is truly free speech.
You say that, but I will be honest with you and say when I was in the UK last, the potholes and road degradation was obvious. I mean,
You and I clearly go to
in
different places in England.
Yeah, yeah, must do, because where I was, and I was just outside of Bedford, man. Like I was around Bedford, Milton Keynes areas, and this is just bog standard cities, and it's like the roads were not in a great state. They were not in a great state. Look, Scotland was still very nice, but there's nothing in Scotland apart from some Scots.
I try not to leave the M25, and I try not to get too far from Mayfair, Chelsea. It's like my vision. I believe there are 300,000 South Africans living within the M25, and I think there's an equivalent number, 300,000 people in South Africa with British passports, myself included. I've got South African and British passport. So there are 300,000. I mean, if there was civil unrest and chaos and people left, the Brits were to get 300,000 potentially, high IQ, well-educated, great sports people into their countries.
That's if that happened. Very expensive though to live in London these days.
Goodness.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Don't translate it to rand. Do not do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Rob, I must be honest and say that was a rather depressing podcast. Thanks for the good news.
Sorry,
You really cheered me up today. I'm sure my viewers are also all sitting there filling out their immigration applications.
Refugee applications.
Yeah, Rob, I struggle with that whole refugee thing, and like people really criticize me for that a lot. But
listen, if you've got an opportunity, take it. What's wrong with that? Look, I'm sorry to depress everyone. I've just got to be honest. I do not see much light at the end of the tunnel. I really don't. I see light, but it's so far off. It's in 2029, and we still have to get there. And then being in America, you see how unbelievable those people are, how incredible that country is. And I mean, you just think...
Also very expensive, though, in the US.
Yeah, but
like, let's be honest,
there,
US is very expensive.
I know, but once you get there and you get your feet on the ground, you take off like a rocket. I mean, that country is in the beginning. It's not in its decline, as people say. It's taking off like a rocket. And this AI world, the market is America. China's going into deflation. China's doomed. It's finished. It's falling apart. Russia couldn't even beat Ukraine in a war. How strong is that? So America's in, folks. Forget Europe. Forget low growth, pathetic, wokey, socialist Europe. America. That's it. And you know, this Chinese friend said to me, he said, you move to Japan, you don't become Japanese. You move to Germany, you don't become German. The day you move to America, you are an American. It's the greatest cultural brand genius ever. And it's a massive consumer market. And people work hard, and that's where you want to be, folks. That's where you want to be.
I've got to ask some logical questions then on the final one. In terms of your countries that you're positive on, obviously you've said America. What about places like Panama, any of the South American countries, North American countries? Any positives there? Or are you mainly just on the US?
No, I think Australia and New Zealand are always going to be the safe haven and, you know, a nice place for South Africans to go. But they've also got their issues. New Zealand's overregulated, very boring, beautiful, great people. Australia's probably a little bit more exciting. But I think, you know, Japan, interesting. But South Korea, very exciting. I mean, South Korea, Japan. You mean where I would go? Or where
just
I'd
where
invest?
you think's up and coming, or where would you invest? Where's
Well,
Saatchi?
in Europe, let's say in Europe, you know, you've got the Scandinavian countries. I like them. Poland, very dynamic. But the sort of big France, Germany, Britain, I mean, just terrible. I'd avoid them.
Legacy economies.
Yeah, legacies, quasi-socialist, you know, massively lazy and overregulated. I'm not a big fan of Canada. My wife and I play this game called punching above and below your weight. So New Zealand, tiny country, punches way above its weight. You know, it's probably the best sporting country in the world if you take Olympic medals per capita. You know, they've got the All Blacks. It's a punch above your weight country. Canada is a punch below your weight country. If I asked you to name one redeeming feature of Canada, I mean, you'd probably take you a while to think about it. They're none.
The Titanic sank off the coast of Nova Scotia. There you go.
The Titanic was built in Ireland, Northern Ireland. Okay, but
No one sunk in Canada.
No one can say anything interesting about Canada. It's like a cold, boring, should be part of Europe. So, you know, where would I live in America? That's a harder question. You know, I don't want to be in communist California. There would have to
Some
be
proper problems. At time of recording, that place is on fire.
Yeah,
having protests everywhere, dude.
Yeah, where would I live? Texas. I like Texas. I like Florida. I wouldn't want to live in New York City. I've done that. And, you know, you've got to be younger to live in the city. So maybe Greenwich, Connecticut. That's it. You know, not bad.
So you want to be a Texan?
Yeah, I've always liked Texas. Texas, red pill states. Texas and Florida.
Big cars, big guns.
Yeah, pickup trucks. I'm much more of a redneck than a hippie. That's for sure. Byron, thanks a lot, buddy. Always good to chat
Take
to
it easy,
you.
man.
And I'll buy you a coffee.
Thanks so much. Take it easy, Rob. Cheers.